and welcome to this video. Today I have a new tutorial for you. We're going to create a mini bills and subscriptions tracker in Google Sheets from scratch. So first I'm going to show you how it works just so you can keep that in mind throughout the tutorial, and then we're going to build the entire thing together from scratch starting with a blank spreadsheet. So this is what it's going to look like blank, and the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to set a month. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to double click on this cell over here, the yellow one, and you're going to pick any date from the month that you want to work with. So if I want to work with October, I just have to pick any date in October, and then this table will be tied to the month of October 2024. And then down below, as a user, you're only going to edit cells that have a white background. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set a due date. So for example, if your rent is paid every month on the 15th, what you're going to do is you're just going to type in the number 15. And then as you can see over here, all I had to do was add the number 15, and the full date was created for me automatically over here using the month and year that I selected at the top. And this is going to happen on every single row. As you can see, I only need to add the day as a number, and the full date is going to get created automatically based on this month and year. So if I change the month, for example, let's do December, then the full dates are going to change to show me this due date in the month of December. So that's our first cool formula that we're going to create. And then over here, all you have to do is type the name of your bills. And then over here, you're just gonna add the expected amount, pretty straightforward. And my total expected amount will be shown up here automatically every time I add a new bill. And then for our second cool formula, once a bill is paid, you're gonna check the box. And there's two things that you can do. If the expected amount is exactly the same as the amount you actually paid, you don't have to write it down. All you have to do is check the box, and the expected amount will become the amount that you paid. And it will be updated in this column over here. So the same thing is gonna happen on every single row. Now, let's say for the electricity bill, for example, you were expecting to pay $35, but you actually paid $45. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna add the number 45 over here as your actual amount, and nothing is going to happen until you actually check the box to mark it as paid. And as soon as you do that, you're gonna notice that the number that's gonna appear over here is going to be the actual amount, not the expected amount. So I'm gonna check this box, and you're going to see that the number 45 is what's showing up here. If I delete that, then what you're going to see is the expected amount. So these are our two cool formulas that we're going to create, our automations. And then I'm also going to show you how to create this scratching effect that happens automatically whenever you check a box. So this is what our final template is going to look like. And this one table is going to be tied to whatever month you select up here. And then once you're ready to start over on a new month, you can either reuse the table and uncheck every box and delete the actual values. You can uncheck multiple boxes at once by selecting them and then pressing the spacebar on your keyboard. So you can either do that, or you can create a duplicate of this tab to start over, or you can actually copy and paste the table and then keep several tables within the same file. So if you're ready, you can go ahead, open a blank Google Sheets spreadsheet, and we can get started with the tutorial. So the most important thing to remember throughout the tutorial is to always do everything in exactly the same cells that I'm doing it. Just in case you run into any issues, your formulas will look exactly like mine. And if you would like to take a look at the original template, I'm going to leave the link to it in the description, so you can use that to compare your file against mine in case you run into any issues. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create this section over here at the top that allows me to select a month. So we're going to add this mini calendar that appears whenever I double click on this cell. So to add that feature, you're going to select cell H2 on your blank spreadsheet, and then you're going to click on data validation, and then this sidebar is going to appear to the right. You're going to click on add rule, and then from this criteria drop down over here, you're going to click on that, and you're going to find the option that says is valid date. So you're going to select that, and then if the data is invalid, you're going to choose the option that says reject the input, because we only care about having a valid date in this cell. And then we're going to click on done. So apparently nothing's going to happen. You can close this sidebar now, and then if you double click on cell H2, you're going to be able to select a date. So go ahead, double click and pick any date that you like. And then as you can see over here, we're not actually seeing the entire date. Even though we are selecting a specific date, we're only seeing the month and the year. So behind the scenes, this is always going to be a date, but we're going to format the way this date looks so that we only see a month and a year. So you're going to select cell H2 and then you're going to click on Format, Number, and then Custom Date and Time. So what you're going to see is a bunch of different options, different ways to format your dates over here. So you're going to find the one that only has the month and the year. So for me, it's over here at the top, but for you, it might be somewhere else. So you can go ahead, find it on the list, click on it. You're going to see that this section up here will update to match whatever you selected. So I have the month and the year. So I'm going to go ahead, click on apply. And now my date is going to be formatted. I'm going to make this wider. It's going to be formatted so I only see the month and the year, even though I am selecting a specific date. So I'm just going to add a border to this cell. I'm going to click on cell H2. I'm going to click on borders and I'm going to change the border color to this third gray from left to right. And then I'm just going to pick the option over here that says outer borders. So we're going to leave this here for now. We're going to use it later. And I'm going to go ahead and create the basic layout for these two tables over here. So I'm going to start with the labels. I'm going to jump into cell B8 and I'm going to type in the label paid. And then right next to it, I'm going to do due day and then bill. Right next to it, expected and then actual. So those are the labels for our first table. And then we're going to skip one cell. And on cell H8, we're going to type in the label full, due date, and then right next to it, amount paid. So those will be our labels, and I just want to make sure that everything is perfectly aligned in the middle of each cell. So this is something that I always do to every single one of my templates. I'm going to start by selecting the entire tab by clicking on this square over here, and then I choose this option over here that says horizontal align, and I pick the one that says center. And then right next to that, the vertical align option, I choose the one that says middle. And right next to that, text wrapping option, I also choose the one in the middle that says wrap. So I always use those three options to make sure that my text is always perfectly aligned in the middle within each cell. So now that I have my labels, I'm going to go ahead and add my checkboxes over here. This one's in the paid column. So we're going to select everything from cell B9 all the way down to cell B33. So you can see the range that I have selected over here. And to add the checkboxes, I'm going to click on Insert, Checkbox, and we're going to work with those later. So I'm just going to change the width of each of these columns so that they make sense. This one can be smaller, the paid one. The one for the due day, I will also make that smaller. The bill one maybe a bit wider. These ones look good. And then this is the gap in between both tables. So I'm going to make that really small. And then the full date, I'm just going to make it a bit wider. And then this first column, I'm actually also going to make it a bit smaller. So now that we have our basic layout, we can start creating our first formula. And what we're going to do is we're going to create this formula over here that makes sure that whenever I add a due date, the full date gets created automatically using this due date and then this month and this year. So if I change the month, every single date will update accordingly, and it's also going to show me the weekday. I always find that useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by adding our first due date on cell C9. It can be anything. I'm just going to do 15, for example. And then we're going to jump into cell H9 and we're going to work on our first formula. So what I want to see in this cell is a full date that gets created using this due date and then this month and this year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the date function on cell H9. I'm going to do equals date and I'm going to open parentheses. And as you can see, this function is expecting three things: a year, a month, and a day. So I'm going to pull the year from this cell over here. I'm going to type in the function year. I'm going to open parentheses and then I'm going to click on cell H2, which holds my date that I select as a user, and I'm going to close parentheses. So now I have the year. I'm going to do a comma. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing, but for the month. So I'm going to use the month function. I'm going to open parentheses. I'm going to click on cell H2. I'm going to close parentheses. And now I have the year, the month, and I'm just missing the day. So I'm going to do a comma. And I'm going to click on cell C9, which holds my due date. And then I'm going to close parentheses. So if I press enter, I'm going to get September 15, 2024. And if I change this to maybe the number 24, I'm going to get September 24, 2024. And if I change the month over here, any date on a different month, then this formula is going to adapt to show me this due date on this corresponding month and year. So this formula will work fine as long as there is a due date in here. If I delete this and there is no due date, this formula is still going to try to create a date, but it's going to end up with something that doesn't make any sense because this cell is empty. So what we're going to do is that before we execute this date formula, we are going to check if there is even a value in here. And the way we're going to do that is with the if function. So I'm going to select cell H9. I'm going to jump over here into my formula, and right after the equal sign, I'm going to type in the if function. So I'm going to do if open parentheses. And then immediately after, I'm going to click on cell C9. And what I want to know is if cell C9 is not empty. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the less than and greater than symbols. So they look like this over here. And then I am going to open quotations, close quotations, and I'm going to do a comma. So what I have here is my condition. If cell C9 is not empty, this is how I'm going to say not empty. So if cell C9 is not empty, then you can go ahead and execute the formula that we originally had. And then if it is empty, we're going to do nothing. And the way we're going to say that is comma. And then since we're not going to do anything, if the cell is empty, we're just going to leave that empty and we're going to close parentheses. So this is what your formula should look like. You can pause the video, make sure your formula looks like mine, and press enter. And right now I don't have a due date in here, which is why nothing's happening. If I add a due date, then my date gets created properly. So make sure that your formula is working properly before moving on. And then depending on your country, you're either going to see the month first or the day first. So to avoid any confusion, let's just format the date right now. So we get to see the weekday and then the month with words and not numbers. So I'm going to click on cell H9 and I'm going to click on format, number, and then custom date and time. We've done this before, and I'm gonna find an option on my list that includes the day of the week, the month, the day as a number, and then the year. Again, you can scroll down and find an option that you like. I'm gonna choose this one. It's a bit more condensed, but you could also find this one that is a bit longer. So choose any one that you like, and then you can go ahead and click on apply. So that looks better, still working properly. We only changed the formatting, and we only have this one formula on this one row, which means if I add a due date on any of the rows below, nothing is going to happen. So for these other rows to work, there needs to be a formula in here, and we can actually just copy this one and paste it down below. But there is one thing that we need to do first to make sure that the formula will work properly. So don't follow along. I'm just going to show you what happens when I copy and paste. If I copy this cell H9, and I paste it down below on cell H10, the formula is not going to work properly. I'm actually going to see some weird date over here. And the reason for that is that when I copied and pasted the formula down below, the formula adapted. And I do want it to adapt so that it's always referencing its corresponding row when it comes to the due date, but I don't want it to adapt when it comes to this date over here. As you can see on my first formula, cell H9, I am referencing cell H2, which holds the date that you select as a user. That's working properly. But when I take a look at the second formula, it tried to adapt and I'm no longer referencing cell H2. So to make sure that we're always referencing cell H2, I'm gonna delete this one below that is not working properly. So you can follow along now. I'm gonna jump into my original formula, cell H9, and over here, right before the number 2, on both of these sections of my formula over here, right before the number 2, I am going to add a $sign. And that's going to make sure that I am always referencing the second row. And the formula never tries to adapt in terms of this row. So go ahead and do this to your own formula. Just add a $sign right between the H and the 2 on both of these sections. And once you do that, you can go ahead, copy the formula on cell H9, and then select cell H10 and paste. We're just going to paste it on this second row first, just to make sure that both of them are working properly. So if you change the due date on the first one, that only affects this first one. If you change the due date on the second one, it changes properly. If there are no due dates, both full dates disappear. And then if you change the month, both dates change properly. So if all of these things are happening and everything is working properly, what you're gonna do next is you're just gonna copy this formula and paste it on the rest of this range. So we're gonna go ahead, copy either one of these two, both should work. So I'm gonna copy cell H9. I'm gonna select everything from cell H11 all the way down to cell H33. This is the range that I have selected, and I'm gonna paste. So apparently nothing will happen because there are no due days here. So to make sure that every single row is working properly, I'm going to run a little test, and I'm going to create a sequence of numbers on this due date column over here. I could do it manually, but let's just do it with a formula. So make sure that there are no due days on column C. If you added any due days, make sure to delete them first. And then you're gonna click on cell C9 and you're gonna do equals, and you're gonna type in the function sequence. We're gonna create a sequence of numbers. You're gonna open parentheses, and then you're gonna add the number 25 because we're working with 25 rows, and then you're gonna close parentheses. You're gonna press enter, and a sequence of 25 numbers is gonna be created on column C. And then if you take a look at this row, you're gonna see that every single one of my dates was created properly, and if I change the month over here, every single one of my dates update properly. So make sure that yours is working properly as well, and we're gonna change the background color of these cells just to remind ourselves that these are formulas and you should never edit them as a user. So I'm gonna select everything from cell H9 all the way down to cell H33, and I'm gonna click on this fill color option over here, and I'm gonna pick this second gray from right to left. So that changes the background, and now we have our first feature working properly. Now this is one way to create this feature. You add a formula on every single one of these cells and it will work properly. But there is one tiny issue with this, and it's the fact that if you want to add a new row somewhere in between, I'm just going to show you an example. Don't follow along, just watch what happens if I try to add a new row over here on row 16. So I'm just going to click on row 16 and insert a new row by right clicking and selecting the option insert one row below. What's going to happen in that new row is that the formula is not going to work, and the reason for that is that this is a new row and there is no formula in here. There's a formula up here and there's a formula here, but this is new. There's no formula here. So what you would have to do is after adding a new row, you would have to manually copy this formula and then paste it down below. It's just an additional step. But I want to show you a trick so that you don't have to manually copy and paste the formula whenever you add a new row. So I'm just going to undo my changes to make sure I only have 25 rows again, and you can follow along now. So first, make sure that you have a due date on every single one of these rows. You can either add it manually or use the sequence formula that I taught you before on cell C9. And once you have your due days, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete every single formula from cell H10 all the way down to cell H33. So I'm going to select that range and I'm going to delete. So now the only row that's working is the first one. And what I'm about to teach you is a way in which I can alter this formula so that it affects the entire range without the need to copy and paste. So it's going to look a bit weird at the beginning if you've never done this before, but the more you use it, the more it's going to start to make sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to select cell H9 and we're going to add a couple things to the formula. So right after the equal sign, I'm going to type in the function array formula and I'm going to open parentheses. And then at the very end, I'm going to close parentheses. So right now, nothing new is going to happen. As you may recall what we're saying here, if cell C9 is not empty, then create my full date using this formula and using cell C9 as my due date. What I'm going to do now is instead of only referencing cell C9 on my formula, I'm going to expand the range. So I'm referencing every single due date cell. So that's everything from cell C9 all the way to cell C33. And the way I'm going to say that within this formula is right after C9, I am going to do a colon and then I'm going to type in C33. So as you can see, immediately after, my new range gets highlighted in this same orange color. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the second C9 over here. Instead of only referencing cell C9, I am going to do a colon and then I'm going to type in C33. So now I am referencing the entire range instead of this one cell. So take a look at what's going to happen after I press enter. Every single row will now work properly and everything is happening from this one cell, from this one formula. So instead of having to copy it and paste it, you can do everything from this one cell using array formula and referencing an entire range instead of one specific cell. So now if I try to do the same thing I did before and insert a row below row 16, I'm gonna right click, insert one row below, immediately it's gonna work. As you may recall, with the previous method, this would be blank and I would have to manually copy and paste the formula. So thanks to array formula, I don't have to do that anymore. And if you take a look at the formula over here, I added a new row, so the formula automatically expanded to cover an additional row. So now my range goes all the way down to cell C34, which is this one over here. And since in my sequence of numbers, I am only creating 25 numbers, if I increase this on cell C9 to 26 numbers, then that covers my new row as well, and every single one of these rows is working properly. Now before moving on, if you added additional rows, let's just make sure that both you and me, we only have 25 rows on our table. So our table should end on row 33. And if you need to delete rows, make sure that you only delete rows in the middle of the table and that you never touch the first one or the last one, just to make sure that you don't mess up the range in the formula. So I'm just gonna delete row 16 because I have one additional row. So right click, delete row, and then as you can see, my table ends on row 33 and I have this additional number because of my sequence formula. But on cell C9, if I change that back to 25, then this is what it should look like. The table ends on row 33 and I only have 25 due days. So make sure that everything is working properly on your version as well, and let's continue. So let's give formulas a break for a minute. I have another cool formula that we're gonna create on the amount paid column, but let's give formulas a break just for a moment and add a tiny bit of more formatting into the template so it starts to look a bit better. So first I'm gonna create the label over here, this one that says double click to pick a month and then a small arrow. So we're gonna merge a range of cells, everything from cell B2 all the way to cell F2. So go ahead, select that range, and then we're gonna click on this merge cells button over here. So now that becomes one big cell, and I'm gonna type in my instruction, double click to pick a month, and then my arrow. So I'm gonna press enter, and I actually want that aligned to the right. So I'm gonna select that cell and I'm gonna click on horizontal align, and I'm gonna pick this option that says right. And then I'm gonna change the background color to a light gray. So I'm gonna click on this fill color option over here, and I'm gonna select the second gray from right to left. And then down below we have our title over here. That's also a range of cells that I merged. So let's go ahead and create that. You're going to select everything from cell B4 all the way to cell F6. And again, we're going to use the merge button over here so that becomes a single cell. And we're just going to give this a title. Mine is going to be Mini Bills and Subscriptions Tracker. And then I'm also going to change the background color of these cells. So I'm just going to select it. I'm going to click on fill color, and I'm going to pick this second gray from right to left. And then let's add some borders to our two tables down below. So I'm just going to select everything from cell B8 all the way down to cell F33, and I'm just gonna click on borders. Again, I'm gonna use this third gray from left to right, and I'm gonna click on outer borders. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the second table. I'm gonna select everything from cell H8 all the way down to cell I33, and then again borders. My color is already selected, and I'm gonna click on outer borders. So after this tiny break that we just had, let's go ahead and create our second formula. So first, let's make sure that we have some example information in here. So if you have this sequence formula on cell C9, let's just go ahead and delete it. And let's just manually add some due days. I'm gonna do the numbers from 1 to 4. And then I'm gonna add a couple example bills. So let's do Netflix, HBO, Spotify, and then maybe our rent. And then over here on the expected amount, just add 4 random amounts. I'm just gonna add some random numbers over here. And let's make sure that this gets formatted as money. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually do it for both of these columns at the same time, since we're also gonna have money here. So I'm just gonna select everything from cell E9. all the way to cell F33, and I'm gonna click on this format as currency button up here. So now that looks good, and then if you add an actual amount, that should also be formatted as money. So for now, I'm just gonna leave 4 expected amounts as examples. I'm not gonna add anything into the actual amount column. And now we're ready to create our next formula. So it's gonna be a long one, but we're gonna break it down into smaller pieces and we're gonna build it slowly. So the first thing that we want to happen is the moment I check this box, I want this expected amount to be transferred into this cell. So let's go ahead and create that feature. So make sure that you check the first box on cell B9 and that you have an expected amount on cell E9. So once that's ready, let's go ahead and click on cell I9 and let's create the first part of our formula. So I'm gonna do equals, and then I'm gonna use the if function again. I'm gonna open parentheses, and my condition is if this box is checked. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna click on cell B9. As you can see, it gets added into my formula. So if cell B9 equals true, that's the value that the checkbox has when it's checked, and when it's not checked, the value is false. So I'm just gonna do a comma. If cell B9 is true, what I want is to show in this cell this amount, cell E9. So I'm gonna click on there, and then if it's not true, I don't want anything to happen, so I'm just gonna do a comma and I'm gonna close parentheses, and then I'm gonna press enter. So what's gonna happen is if the box is checked, you're gonna see your expected amount gets transferred into cell I9, and if the box is not checked, then you're not gonna see anything. So make sure that this is working properly. You can take a look at the formula and pause the video if you need to. So once that's working properly, let's build the next part of our formula. So what we want to happen is that I only want to show the expected amount when I have not added an actual amount. If I add an actual amount, let's add a different one for the example. Let's do 15. That's the amount that I want to see over here when the box is checked. And the way we're gonna do that is make sure that your box is checked and that you also have an actual amount. And we're gonna jump into the formula again, cell I9. So I'm gonna replace what happens when the box is checked, and instead I'm going to add an additional condition. So I'm gonna delete E9 from my formula, and right after the first comma, I'm gonna use the if function again to check for another condition. So I'm gonna do if, open parentheses, and then I'm gonna click on cell F9. So if cell F9 is not empty, the way I'm gonna say that is with this less than and greater than symbols that you can see up here, and then open quotations, close quotations. So if cell F9 is not empty, I'm gonna do a comma, and what I am going to use is the value that's inside cell F9. So I'm gonna click on cell F9 again. It gets added into my formula, and then if it is empty, I'm gonna do a comma, and the value that I'm gonna use instead, if cell F9 is empty, is what I had before, cell E9, the expected amount. So I'm gonna click on cell E9, and then I'm gonna close parentheses. So this is what your formula should look like. If cell B9 is true, if the box is checked, then you are going to do this, whatever's after the first comma. So what we're doing here is we're checking for another condition. And what we're saying is if cell F9 is not empty, if there is an actual amount on cell F9, then go ahead and use the value on cell F9. And if that condition isn't met, if cell F9 is empty, then you can go ahead and use the expected amount, the value found on cell E9. So the if function takes 3 arguments. First, your logical expression, your condition, and then if that condition is true, this is what's going to happen, and if that condition is false, then this is what's going to happen. So what you have here is an if function nested within another if function, and then this space over here, that's the third argument of our first if condition. So if B9 is true, if the box is checked, then you're going to do this, and if it's not true, the box is not checked, then you're not going to do anything, which is why we're going to leave that empty. So make sure that your formula looks like this. You can pause the video if you need to. And now I'm going to go ahead and press enter. So what's going to happen is right now my box is checked and I have an actual amount. So that's what's being shown in here. If I uncheck the box, then nothing is going to be shown in there. If I check it again and I delete the actual amount, then what I'm going to see is the same amount as the expected amount. And right now this is only going to work on the first row because we only have have a formula on the first row. So our next step is to make sure that this exact same thing happens on every single one of our cells down here. And the way we're gonna do that is, once again, similar to what we did over here, we're gonna use array formula, and we're gonna change our formula so that instead of working with just one single cell, we are working with the entire range. So our range is gonna go all the way down to row 33. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna change the formula on cell I9 so that from this one formula, we can create this exact same functionality for this entire column. So let's go ahead and click on cell I9, and then let's jump into our formula, and right after the equal sign, once again, we're gonna use array formula, and we're gonna open parentheses, and then at the very end of our formula, we're gonna close parentheses. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna reference the entire range instead of individual cells. Remember, our range ends on row 33. So what I'm gonna do is, first, I'm gonna set my cursor right after B9 in my formula, and I'm gonna expand this to cover the entire range. So I'm gonna do a colon, and then I'm gonna do B33. And as you can see, my entire range of checkboxes gets highlighted. So now I'm gonna jump into my first F9, and right after the number 9, I'm gonna do a colon, and I'm gonna add F33. So now, as you can see, that entire range got highlighted over here. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing to the second F9. I'm gonna do a colon, and then F33. And then over here, E9, right after the 9, I'm gonna do a colon, and I'm gonna do E33. So as you can see, the ranges that I created got highlighted over here, so I can visually make sure that I am covering the entire range for all of these 3 columns. And once I'm ready, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna press enter. So I lost my currency formatting. We're gonna bring back that $sign in a moment, but first I'm gonna check that the formula works properly. If I go ahead and check a second box, and if I have an expected amount here, then that's what's gonna get transferred into the amount paid. And if I add an actual amount, then the actual amount is what's gonna get shown in here. And that should work on every single cell. So if I keep on checking boxes, I'll keep on seeing my amounts get transferred. And if I add an actual amount, then that's what I should see as the amount paid. So let's make sure that this also looks like a currency. So I'm just gonna select everything from cell I9 all the way down to cell I33, and I'm just gonna click on this format as currency button over here. So that looks good. Before moving on, I just wanna make sure that the entire range works. So I'm just gonna run a test on the very last row. So I'm just gonna add a random due date, a random bill name, and then an expected amount. I'm gonna check the box, and that expected amount will be transferred into the amount paid. And then I'm gonna add an actual amount that's different from my expected amount, and then that's the one that should be shown on this amount paid cell over here. And then if I uncheck the box, the amount paid should disappear. So by checking the first row and the last row, I'm making sure that my entire range is working. I'm gonna show you the formula one more time so you can pause the video and make sure it looks exactly like mine in case you have any issues. So once you're sure yours is working properly as well, we can continue. So now I'm gonna add a couple other formulas over here. We're just gonna show the total expected amount and the total amount paid. Those are gonna be very simple. So let's do the labels first. So I'm gonna select cell H4, and I'm gonna add the label total expected. And then on cell I4, I'm gonna add total paid. And then I'm going to merge these 2 cells together, cells H5 and H6. So I'm just going to select them and click on merge cells. And I'm going to do the same thing with cells I5 and I6. I'm just going to select them, both of them, and then I'm going to click on merge cells. So I get a bigger cell over here for my totals. So let's add up the total expected amount. It's going to be very simple. We're just going to select cell H5, and we're going to do equals sum, open parentheses, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to select the entire range from cell E9 all the way down to cell E33. And you're going to see that that's what gets updated over here in my formula. So I'm just going to close parentheses and press enter. And now I get the total expected amount over here at the top. So then I'm just going to add the total amount over here as well. This is going to be the total paid. So on cell I5, I'm just going to do equals sum, open parentheses, and I'm going to select everything from cell I9 all the way down to cell I33. I'm going to close parentheses and I'm going to press enter. And now we can see our total amount paid over here at the top. So now all of our formulas are working properly. So let's go ahead and improve the way this looks so we can make it prettier. And then we're going to go ahead and add our scratching effect that happens whenever you check the box. So before we jump into that feature, let's just make this prettier. So let's start by adding some borders to this section over here. I'm going to select everything from cell H4 all the way to cell I6, and I'm going to click on borders. I'm going to pick this third gray from left to right, and I'm going to click on outer borders. And now I'm going to make this a bit more symmetric. So first I'm going to merge together cells H2 and I2. So I'm just going to select both of these cells and I'm going to click on merge cells. And then I want these two columns to be the exact same size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of them by clicking on this H over here and dragging all the way to the I. And I'm just going to change the width in the full date column H, just to make sure that the dates fit on my cells. And as you can see, since I selected both of them, I just need to change the width in one of them and both of them will be the exact same width. So that looks symmetric. And you can also do the same thing with the height of rows. You can select multiple rows and have them be the exact same height. So let's go ahead and do that and make sure that these 3 rows are smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 3 of them at the same time. So first I'm going to click on row 1, and then if you're on a Mac, you're going to press Command on your keyboard, and if you're on a Windows, you're going to press Control, and then without releasing, you're going to click on row 3, and still without releasing, you're going to click on row 7. So that selects non-consecutive rows, and then you can just change the height in one of them, and you'll be changing the height on all 3 of them at the same time. So that looks better. And now let's play around with our labels. So this one up here, to double click on the month one, I'm just going to make it italic by clicking on this button over here. And then our title, let's make that bigger. I'm going to change the font size to 17 up here. I'm going to press enter. And then my labels, I want them to be bold. So I'm going to select first these 2 labels. I'm going to click on the bold option over here. And then I'm going to select these other labels from this first table. And again, I'm going to click on bold. And the same thing for these 2 last labels. And I'm going to click on bold. And I'm actually also going to bold the title. So I'm just going to select it and click on bold. So that's starting to look a bit better. And we can also bold our total amounts just so they are highlighted. So I'm just going to select both of my totals. And again, I'm going to click on bold. And now I kind of want to see some color already, so I'm just gonna add these 3 colors over here, and I'm gonna change the font color as well. So let's start with this one at the top. I'm just gonna select both of these labels. I'm gonna click on the fill color, and I'm going to change the background to this purple. If you want the exact same purple, what you're gonna do is you're gonna click on the fill color option. You're gonna click on this plus sign over here that says add custom color, and you're gonna copy this exact same value. And once you have this color, you can click on OK. And I'm also going to change the font color of this to white, so it looks better. And then I'm going to change the background color for the labels in my first table. So I'm just going to select all of my labels. Again, I'm going to click on fill color, and I will use this pink one over here. And again, if you want to use this same color, you click on the plus sign and you copy the exact same value that I have over here. And once it's pink, you can click on OK. And again, I'm going to change the font color to white. And finally, I'm going to add a nice blue over here on my last 2 labels. So again, I'm going to click on fill color, and I'm going to use this blue over here. If you want this exact same color, you can click on your plus sign and add this exact same value over here. So I'm going to click on OK, and I'm also going to change the font color to white. And let's do one more thing before we work on our scratching effect. I want to make sure that the user only edits cells that have a white background. So I'm going to change the background color of the cells that are supposed to be automated. So first I'm going to do these 2. I'm going to select both of my totals. I'm going to click on the fill color, and I'm going to click on the second gray from right to left. And then I'm going to select my amount paid cells. So I'm going to select everything from cell I9 all the way down to cell I33, and I'm gonna change that background color as well to this second gray. So those background colors are a reminder that you shouldn't edit those cells, because if you do, you're gonna mess up the formulas. So these are automated and should not be edited. So that is looking a lot better. And now we can go ahead and create our scratching effect so that whenever we check a box, the expected amount gets scratched and the full due date also gets scratched. So I'm going to start with the expected amount, and I'm going to select everything from cell E9 all the way down to cell E33. And then we're going to create our conditional formatting rule by clicking on Format, Conditional Formatting, and the sidebar is going to appear over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to select from this dropdown the option that says Custom Formula Is right at the very end. And we're going to create our condition over here so that whenever this condition is met, this is the formatting style that is going to get applied to this range over here. Everything from cell E9 to cell E33. So I want this range to get this style whenever my box is checked. And the way I'm going to do that is in this text box over here, I'm going to do equals B9, which holds my first checkbox, equals true. And then I'm going to change the formatting style. I'm going to click on the fill color option and I'm just going to choose none. And then the font color, I'm going to change that to a lighter gray. So I'm going to do this fourth gray from left to right. And then I'm going to choose my strike through option to create that scratching effect. And I'm actually also going to make that italic. So I'm going to click on this italic option. And as you can see, all my boxes are checked. So this scratching effect is being applied to every single one of my expected amounts. And then if I uncheck a box, the scratching effect is gone. So as I mentioned, this is the range where my conditional formatting rule is being applied. And this range is going to be formatted in this way whenever this condition is met. And even though I have an entire range selected, when I'm creating my condition as a custom formula, I only need to create this formula thinking in terms of the first cell of my range. So cell E9 should get formatted. Cell E9 is this one over here, my first expected amount. This one should only get formatted if the checkbox on cell B9 is checked, which means its value is true. So as you can see, I am creating this rule as if only the first cell in my range would be affected by it. And then Google Sheets is smart enough to apply this same logic to this entire range. So once you're sure that your expected amount gets scratched automatically whenever you check a box, you can click on Done, and then you can close the sidebar. And now we're going to do the exact same thing to the full due date cells. Again, we're going to select everything from cell H9 all the way down to cell H33. We're going to click on Format, Conditional Formatting, and if you want to practice, you can pause the video and do it yourself. It's going to be the exact same thing as what we did before, and if you don't want to do that, that's okay, you can just follow along. So I'm going to click again on this drop down over here. I'm going to select the option Custom Formula Is, and again I'm going to create my formula thinking only in terms of the first cell of my range. So cell H9, which holds my first date, will be scratched if cell B9 is true. So I'm going to do equals B9 equals true. And right now this is the formatting that's being applied. So let's change that. I'm going to change the background color to none, the font to this fourth gray from left to right. I'm going to choose the strike through effect, and I'm also going to choose this italic effect. So as you can see, it is now working properly. Whenever you check a box, the expected amount is scratched and the full due date is also scratched. So if that's working properly, we can go ahead and click on Done, and we can close this. So now all of our formulas are working properly, our scratching effect is working properly, and the last thing we're going to do is add the final touches so that we can go from this to something that looks like this. So first, I'm just going to make sure that this is also bold. So I'm just going to click on cell H2 and I'm going to click on bold. And then I'm going to change the font on this tab all at once by clicking on this square over here right above the number 1 and picking the font Lato. For example, you can pick any one that you like. And then as you might have noticed on my example, I actually don't have grid lines over here. And then these grid lines in here are a lot lighter than what we have over here right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my own grid lines, and then I'm going to get rid of these grid lines over here that are found by default so that those lines are not as harsh. So I'm going to start by adding in my own grid lines on both of these tables. I'm going to select everything everything from cell B9 all the way down to cell F9. And then I'm gonna click on borders and I'm gonna choose this third gray color from right to left. And then I'm gonna choose this option over here that says inner borders. And as you can see, they are now looking a lot lighter. And I'm actually also gonna add a top border over here because I don't know if you can tell, but it's gonna look a tiny bit weird on these bottom corners of these cells. You can barely see it, but it bothers me. So I'm also gonna add a top border so that weird looking thing that happens is gone. And then I'm also gonna create my own grid lines over here. So I'm gonna select everything from cell H9 all the way down to cell I33, and I'm gonna click on borders. And since this has already a gray background, I'm gonna choose a white border. So I'm gonna choose the color white. Again, I'm gonna click on inner borders and I'm also gonna click on top border, and it looks something like this. So now that I have my own grid lines added in here, I can go ahead and get rid of the original grid lines. And the way we're gonna do that is we're gonna click on view, show, and then grid lines. So now the harsh grid lines are gone and all I'm seeing are the grid lines that I just added in myself. Now, I want to add one final thing just so that you never forget that you're supposed to pick a month, because if there isn't a month in here, this doesn't make any sense. This formula is not going to work properly. So your first step is always to pick a month. So what I'm going to do so that you don't forget to do that is first, let's go ahead and click on cell H2 and delete the month selection. And then you're going to click on format, conditional formatting. We're just gonna do an easy one. We're just gonna select from this drop down the one that says is empty. So if that cell is empty, we're gonna add a very annoying yellow color and we're gonna click on done. Since this is empty, it will turn yellow, and then if I double click in here and pick a month, then the yellow is gone and my formulas are working fine. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and please let me know in the comments if you were able to build the entire thing yourself from scratch. I would love to know that. If you would like to watch other free tutorials, I'm gonna leave the links to those in the description, and I'm also gonna leave the link to my shop in case you would like to check out some of my more advanced templates. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.